You probably have a mental image of the pirate parrot. It's on the shoulder. It's saying something. It has an opinion about everything and a memory for words that outlast the judgment of the man who taught them to it. The parrot is decoration, comedy, accessory. It is part of the mythology in the same way the eye patch is part of the mythology, the way the skull and crossbones is part of the mythology. Colorful, loud, slightly threatening, mostly harmless. What almost nobody thinks about is what happened to it when the captain died, what happened to it when the ship went down, what happened to it when the man whose shoulder it lived on was hanged at Port Royal, or shot through the chest in a fight over a merchant vessel off the coast of Hispaniola. The parrot in the mythology is always alive. The parrot in the actual historical record had a significantly more complicated situation. Let's start with why pirates had parrots in the first place, because the answer is more practical and less romantic than the mythology suggests. Parrots were cargo, not pets in the modern sentimental sense, not companions chosen for emotional support or because someone needed something warm to talk to on a long voyage. They were exotic animals that could be bought cheaply in the tropical ports where pirate ships spent significant time, and sold for considerable profit in European markets where wealthy buyers would pay well for a bird that could speak, perform tricks, and demonstrate visually and audibly that you had been somewhere interesting and survived it. A parrot purchased in Tortuga or along the West African coast or in the ports of Madagascar could sell in London or Bristol or Amsterdam for the equivalent of several weeks of an ordinary sailor's wages. In a world without photographs or recordings, a speaking bird was one of the most extraordinary objects a person could own. It was proof of travel. It was status. They were, in the simplest possible terms, a trade good. Something portable, durable, and self-maintaining in that it could eat whatever scraps were available on a working ship without requiring dedicated feeding systems or storage space beyond a cage or a perch. The practice of sailors and pirates keeping parrots was documented across multiple accounts, from the golden age of piracy, roughly 1680 to 1730. It was not unique to pirates. Naval sailors did it. Merchant sailors did it. Anyone making long voyages through tropical regions had access to the same birds and the same incentive to bring one back. What made the pirate parrot culturally distinct was primarily Robert Louis Stevenson's Long John Silver, whose parrot Captain Flint, named after Silver's former captain, crystallized the image in 1883 in ways that have proven essentially impossible to dislodge from the popular imagination. Before Stevenson, there were parrots on ships. After Stevenson, there was the pirate parrot. The specificity of the image, the shoulder perch, the constant commentary, the sailor who carries his bird with him everywhere, comes from one novel. The historical reality was considerably more varied. A parrot on a working pirate ship lived in an environment that would challenge the romantic image considerably. The ship was loud, violent, and frequently dangerous. The diet available to a parrot on an extended voyage was whatever could be spared from the ship's stores, which at the best of times included dried biscuit, salt meat, and whatever fresh food could be acquired quickly in port. Parrots are not metabolically fragile birds. They evolved in environments where food availability varies and where opportunistic eating is a survival skill. A ship's parrot would eat what was available and generally survive it, but the conditions of extended ocean voyages were not what most of these birds had been raised in, and mortality among ship's birds over long voyages was not insignificant. Now let's get to the actual question. The captain dies. The bird is on the shoulder, or in the cabin, or in a cage hung from a beam in the captain's quarters. What happens next? The answer depends entirely on when, in the voyage, the captain dies, what the bird is worth, and who is in charge afterward. None of these variables favor the bird's continued comfort, but only one of them is likely to result in the bird being eaten. If the captain died early in a voyage and the ship had sufficient food stores, the parrot would almost certainly be kept alive. It was worth money in port. It was a liquid asset, which on a pirate ship operating outside normal commercial systems was a meaningful thing to be. The crew or the new captain would have had every rational incentive to keep the bird alive, healthy enough to be sold, and available to generate the profit it had always represented. Parrots were not emotionally irreplaceable. They were inventory. If the captain died late in an extended voyage, in conditions where food was running short, where the crew had been at sea for months and had exhausted most of their stores, the calculation shifts. A parrot eating the remaining biscuit ration Is a parrot competing with the crew for survival resources? Historical accounts of extreme food deprivation on long voyages document sailors eating things that under normal circumstances would be inconceivable. Leather, candles, rats when rats could be caught. A parrot, under those conditions, is protein. It is a small amount of protein relative to the problem, but in genuine starvation conditions, a small amount of protein is not a small thing. Whether specific named parrots were eaten is not well documented in the historical record, which is unsurprising because the historical record of pirate ships is incomplete in ways that reflect the fundamental nature of the enterprise. Pirates operating outside the law did not keep meticulous logs of decisions or what they consumed when desperate. What we can say with confidence is that the conditions under which a ship's parrot would have been considered as food did exist repeatedly on extended voyages in this period, and that historical accounts of other long voyages in the same era document animals of all kinds being consumed when nothing else remained. The parrot was not exempt from the logic of survival because someone had given it a name. The third possibility is the most interesting and the least romantic. The parrot outlives the captain, survives the voyage, arrives in port, and is sold. This is probabilistically the most likely outcome for a bird that had survived the conditions of the ship itself. The parrot becomes someone else's property, a merchant's living room ornament, a curiosity displayed to guests, a bird that over the following years continues to produce words and sounds from a context that no longer exists. Pirates who have been dead for a decade or more, still present in the vocabulary of a bird that learned from them and remembers everything it has learned. This is the genuinely strange part. African gray parrots, which were among the most commonly traded parrot species in this period, because of their exceptional vocal mimicry and their documented ability to learn and reproduce human speech with remarkable accuracy, can live for 50 to 80 years in captivity under reasonable conditions. A parrot that spent 3 years on a pirate ship at the age of 5 could still be alive and producing speech in a comfortable English household at the age of 60. The vocabulary it had acquired on that ship, the words and phrases, the tones of voice, the names of people who had been dead for decades, would persist not as a fading echo, but as a fully intact sonic record, repeated not because the parrot understood what it was saying or missed the people it was quoting, but because parrots repeat what they have heard and do not selectively forget what they no longer need. The ship would be gone, the captain would be gone, the crew would be scattered or dead or transported to the other side of the world. But somewhere in the sounds this bird produced automatically in response to the stimuli it had learned to associate with specific words and phrases, the ship would still exist. The captain would still be giving orders, the crew would still be arguing, all of it preserved in a medium that nobody had designed for preservation, and that would outlast almost everything else from that world. Whether this is melancholy or interesting depends on how you choose to think about memory. The parrot was not preserving anything intentionally. It was not mourning. It was not loyal. It was doing exactly what parrots do, which is produce sounds they have associated with contexts, regardless of whether those contexts still exist. But the sounds themselves are real. The words persist. The captain's name, spoken in the captain's presence often enough to be learned, continues to be spoken by an animal that has no idea the captain is dead, in rooms the captain never saw, long after anyone who knew the captain has also died. There is something in that which resists easy categorization, not quite memory, not quite forgetting, something in between that the language of grief and the language of biology are equally unequipped to describe precisely. The parrot did not know what it had lost, but it kept saying the name anyway, every day, because that is what parrots do, and because, in this particular case, there was nobody left to teach it to say something different.